In the early 17th century, Maria Eleonora of Brandenburg married into the Swedish royal family. Eager to give her husband heirs, Maria Eleonora rejected her child simply for being a girl. In 1626, King Augustus Adolphus was thrilled to have a daughter. She is going to be clever, for she has taken us all in, he said after everyone first thought the baby was a boy. But Maria Eleonora was horrified. Instead of a son, I am given a daughter, dark and ugly, with a great nose and black eyes. She shouted, "Take her from me, I will not have such a monster." After the Queen's rejection, the baby nearly perished twice. Once when a ceiling beam fell on her cradle, and another when she fell down the stairs. It is most likely Maria Eleonora was behind the attempts on her daughter Christina's life. The British royal family were not fond of Wallis Simpson, the divorcee who came between Edward VIII and his throne. After Edward brought Simpson to Queen Victoria House, the Queen Mother snubbed her. She walked right past her, declaring, "I came to dine with the King." Queen Victoria had 9 children. She relied on her favourite and last child, Beatrice, as a companion after her other children were married. But when Beatrice wanted to get married, Queen Victoria stopped talking to her for months. Victoria didn't want Beatrice to marry, preferring her daughter to remain by her side. When Prince Henry of Battenberg began to woo Beatrice, Victoria objected, and when Beatrice said she intended to marry Henry, Victoria only communicated with her daughter by note. The Queen's pettiness didn't stop Beatrice. She married Prince Henry anyway. Napoleon was not fond of his siblings. At one point, the Emperor complained, "My relations have done me more harm than I have done them good. I love no one, no, not even my brothers." Napoleon said this in 1814. As Emperor, Napoleon demanded complete loyalty from his subjects and his family. When his younger brother Lucien married a woman that Napoleon didn't approve of, he banished them to Italy. He also taunted his family by lavishing titles on his wife Josephine. When Napoleon became emperor, he made his sisters carry Josephine's train. King Peter III of Russia loved to play with toy soldiers. Not much for ruling, he forced his wife, Catherine, to dress in military uniform and carry out drills. He also had a nightly ritual of playing with his toys. When a mouse chewed one of Peter's toy soldiers, the king was furious. He caught the offending rodent and put it on trial. Peter declared the mouse guilty of treason, building a miniature gallows to hang the convicted crook. Catherine saw her husband as an idiot and removed him from power, taking control of Russia and becoming Catherine the Great. The sons of William the Conqueror didn't get along. In 1707, the eldest son, Robert, was the victim of a prank that started a rebellion. 2 of his younger brothers took a chamber pot and dumped the contents on Robert while he was playing dice with friends. Angry at the prank, Robert tried to seize one of his father's castles in an act of rebellion, and that was just the start. When William the Conqueror died, he left his kingdom to his second son rather than Robert, which fueled a family feud that lasted for decades. Xerxes the Great ruled over one of the most powerful empires in history, but even the Persian king wasn't above pettiness. Standing where a Persian bridge had collapsed, he ordered his men to whip the water in retribution. As the troops gave the water 300 lashes, they cried out, "Bitter water, our master thus punishes you, because you did him wrong, though he had done you none. The king will pass over you, whether you want it or not." Henry VIII met Anne of Cleves privately on New Year's Day 1540. Henry and some of his courtiers, following a courtly love tradition, went disguised into the room where Anne was staying. When the disguised king kissed Anne, this was the point when Anne was to recognise the king. Instead, she turned away, embarrassed that a stranger was so informal. Henry then revealed his true identity to Anne. "I like her not, I like her not," Henry shouted after his first meeting, but went ahead with the wedding. Henry cried, "She is nothing fair, and how very evil smells about her." Henry had the marriage annulled, which was probably a good thing for Anne, who spent the rest of her days living in the English countryside, while Henry had his next wife executed. In 1589, King James VI of Scotland married Anne of Denmark. On their way to Scotland, a storm nearly sank the ship. James became convinced that witches were plotting against his marriage. Looking for a scapegoat to punish for the storms, James spent his honeymoon interrogating witches. Caligula was not fond of the Roman Senate. In fact, he thought his horse would make a better ruler than his political rivals. Incitatus was a pampered horse. He lived in a marble stall and ate from an ivory manger. He had his own house and a collar decked with jewels, and he even ate gold flakes on his oats. Caligula's petty message told the Roman aristocracy that even a horse could do a better job than them. Edward II and Isabella of France met in Dover in 1308, but instead of lavishing attention on his new bride, Edward kissed his male lover, Piers Gaveston, in front of the entire court. Isabella quickly discovered that while Edward had a seemingly unstoppable reserve of cash for Gaveston, the money she had been promised for her marriage was taking a very long time to reach her. Meanwhile, the jewels that her father had presented to her as a wedding gift were being shared by the king with his lover. Isabella, the she-wolf of France, had her husband imprisoned. Edward died by having a red-hot poker inserted into his backside. In the 5th century, Clovis I, King of France, pillaged a lot of churches before converting to Christianity. At one of these churches, Clovis took a vase, and when one of his followers smashed the vase, Clovis had his revenge. He held a grudge after his soldier crushed the vase with an axe. An entire year later, Clovis walked up to the soldier and said, "No one bears his arms so clumsily as thou." The king grabbed the man's axe and threw it on the ground. When the soldier bent over to pick up the axe, Clovis swung his own into the soldier's head. In 1821, a French pastry chef ran a bakery in Mexico City. When his bakery was ransacked in the years after Mexico declared independence from Spain, The pastry chef demanded compensation put off by the Mexican government. The chef turned to King Louis Philippe of France. Louis Philippe turned around and demanded that the Mexican government pay 60,000 pesos for the destroyed pastry shop. When Mexico refused, it triggered a war that became known as the Pastry War. The French Navy blocked Mexican seaports and attacked. French Marines attacked Mexico's Navy. The short-lived conflict ultimately ended when Mexico agreed to pay France, including compensation for the pastry shop. King George IV did not get along with his wife Caroline of Brunswick. After separating from her and trying to get a divorce, George decided to publicly humiliate her. The couple married in 1795 and only spent 2 nights together before they separated. George spent years trying to divorce Caroline with no luck. In 1820, when George became king, he turned Caroline away from his coronation. The event took place at Westminster Abbey in 1821. When Caroline showed up, the guards at the door turned her away for not having a ticket. And this concludes the video. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please click the like button, give it a thumbs up, and please subscribe for future videos. Thank you.